Hi there. Today's tea break tip is around aligning your human resources to growth. And this is plain green tea, and we've got about 5 minutes or so. So let's get cracking. First of all, I'd like to share with you my slides. So let's just put the screen share up, and voila, we have aligning HR for growth. Now, what we have here is Greiner's growth model. It's one that I came across many years ago, and I still find extremely interesting and valuable when talking to businesses about the phases of growth that they're in. So if you have a look along the top line there, you have phase 1 through to 6. Originally, Larry E. Greiner proposed a model in 1972 with just 5 phases of growth. And then in 1998, he added the 6th phase in an updated version of his original. And if we have a look at those, we can see that the first phase is creativity. And he says that in the first instance, from business startup, the entrepreneurs who founded the firm are busy creating the products and opening up markets. There aren't many staff, so informal communication works fine, and rewards for long hours are probably through profit share or perhaps stock options. However, as more staff join, production expands and capital is injected, and there is a need for more formal communication. And this ends up with a leadership crisis where professional management is needed, and the founders who did things on a wing and a prayer need to take on a more formalized role. Or even bring people in order to take on the direction of the business. So then we move on to phase 2, which is growth through direction. And this continues with much more formal communications, the introduction of budgets, and a focus on separate activities like marketing and production. Incentive schemes will replace stock as a financial reward. However, there comes a point when the products and processes become so numerous that there's not enough hours in the day for one person to manage them all. And the manager can't possibly know as much about all of the products and services as those lower down the hierarchy. And that ends up in the autonomy of crisis. And new structures are therefore needed so that delegation can take place. And our phase 3 is growth through delegation. With mid-level managers freed up to react fast to opportunities for new products or new markets, the organisation continues to grow, with top management then just monitoring and dealing with the big issues, perhaps starting to look at mergers and acquisition opportunities. Many businesses flounder at this stage as the manager whose directive approach solved the problems at the end of phase 1 finds it hard to let go, and yet the middle managers often struggle with their new roles as leaders. This phase ends with a control crisis. A much more sophisticated head office function is required, and the separate parts of the business start to need to work together. And here we go into phase 4, the growth through coordination and monitoring. Growth continues with the previously isolated business units reorganized into product groups or service practices. Investment finance is allocated centrally and managed according to return on investment and not just profits. Incentives are shared through company-wide profit share schemes aligned to corporate goals. Eventually, though, work becomes submerged under increasing amounts of bureaucracy and growth may become stifled. This phase tends to end on a red tape crisis point. A new culture and structure must be introduced in order to move through that into phase 5, growth through collaboration. The formal controls of phases 2 to 4 are replaced by professional good sense as staff group and regroup flexibly in teams to deliver products in a matrix structure supported by sophisticated information systems and team-based financial rewards. This phase ends with a crisis of internal growth. Further growth can only come by developing partnerships with complementary organisations. And this is where the alliance phase comes in. Greiner's recently added sixth phase suggests that growth may continue through mergers, outsourcing, networks, and other solutions involving other companies. Growth rates will vary between and even within phases. The duration of each phase depends almost totally on the rate of growth of the market in which the organisation operates. The longer a phase lasts, though, the harder it will be to implement a transition. It's really important to recognise that the phases of growth are not time-based, and actually quite often, as previously mentioned, companies can get stuck in any one of those earlier phases before moving through and finding its way past the crisis. And sometimes some companies never ever get past the crisis of autonomy or the crisis of control, because actually that's not what the owners wanted. So moving on from the Greiner's model, I'd just like to share with you, this is a model that I created myself, or an exercise I created myself. And it's based in a similar way to the way that Greiner has developed his phases, in that this is a 5-phase business plan. It's not a 5-year, because each phase may take a different amount of time. But just as recognising the elements of getting stuck in Greiner's model, this 5-phase business plan, where we look at the visual description of where we think we will be at the end of phase 1 through to phase 5, gives us also an opportunity to look at what physical resources we may need at that point. Sometimes those physical resources may be actual premises or desking or products. Other times it's service and very people orientated. The final column has a pound sign in it, and that is to denote the fact that all those physical resources that we identify have a cost. And at each point where we're looking to invest in the business, we need to be looking at a return on that investment. And that column allows us to consider what that investment is and what our rate of return should be. So it's a very linear opportunity to look at planning out the strategic method of growth to get from where you are now to where your vision is. Now I'm just going to stop sharing the screen there and come back to you very briefly to finish off for this session. That's Greiner's 6 phases for growth, and my own version of the 5-phase business plan. It's worth your while sitting down with your post-it notes and looking through where you are currently and what people you have in your business now, and where you want to be at the end of phase 5, and what the resources you will need in place in order to make that happen. Just in the way that we've seen through other business gurus who say start with the end in mind, it's well worth looking at where you want to be at the end of phase 5 and working backwards to phase 1 where you are today. Good luck with that. I think it's time for me to have a sip of my green tea, get rid of my sore throat.